I never expected that Grandma's call would trigger such a cascade of memories and emotions. My name is Tina, and at the age of 29, I've built the life I've always dreamed of, a leadership position, a luxury apartment in downtown Boston, and, most importantly, complete independence from my so-called family. Tina, honey, my grandmother's familiar warm voice came on the line. I wanted to let you know that your parents and Peyton have moved into a new house. She paused, and I could hear the hesitation in her voice. They're planning a housewarming party in 3 weeks. I couldn't help but grin. Are you and Grandpa leaving? No, dear, Grandma's voice became a little quieter. We don't feel good enough for all this noise and fuss. I imagined her in her favorite armchair, knitting in her hands. She was hardly going to discuss this move with Joy. My grandmother never supported my parents' decisions, especially when it came to me. Your grandfather's arthritis has worsened again. Take care of yourself, I said, genuinely worried. My grandparents were the only family members I cared about. I'll visit you both soon. That would be wonderful, dear. We miss you. Another pause. Tina. I know it's complicated, but maybe. Grandma, I interrupted her gently. We both know they won't invite me, and that's okay. I hung up the phone and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread out in front of me like a flickering carpet of lights, and my reflection stared at me intently, a successful woman in a tailored suit, far from the girl she once was. The irony did not escape me. My parents' new house was probably more modest compared to my apartment, but they would never know. I tried to keep my success a secret by not appearing on social media for years. My phone rang again. Don't you dare turn down your birthday party tomorrow, Ashley, my best friend from college, said without preamble. I've already ordered a cake and convinced half of the office to come. I laughed. That would be a real feat. Seriously, Tina, you need to celebrate. The 30s are coming, and you're destroying everything in your path. Let's brag about it a little bit. Let's take some photos, post them online, show the world that Tina Miller is living her best life. I hesitated. For years, I hid my life, not wanting any connections with the past. But maybe Ashley was right. Good, I admitted. But nothing too crazy. It's too late. She cried out cheerfully. I've already hired a photographer. The photographer was worth every penny. My apartment looked like a picture from an architectural magazine, sparkling marble countertops, flickering city light behind huge windows, stylish people with glasses of champagne. After years of silence on social media, I finally posted the photos. Look at you, girl. Ashley exclaimed, scrolling through the comments. Your post is exploding. I looked at the phone screen. The likes and comments really flooded in. Former classmates, colleagues, and even distant relatives wrote words of surprise. It was strange, like I'd finally taken off a mask I'd been wearing for years. The next morning, my phone rang. An unknown number. Tina, this is Mom. The voice on the phone was painfully familiar. My stomach clenched. I recognized that artificially cheerful but strained tone from Sarah Miller, and with it came an avalanche of unwanted memories. I got your number from Grandma, she continued. I saw your photos online. Your apartment is impressive. We had no idea that you were doing so well. Of course, they didn't suspect. I could almost hear my teeth grinding. You didn't think, I said slowly. Because you never bothered to ask. There was a pause on the other end. Then she spoke again, a little more softly. Housewarming next weekend. We would love to. Are you coming? Everyone will be so happy to see you. All. I guess now that I've achieved success, they'll really be happy. I heard the awkwardness in my mother's voice, barely noticeable, but still legible. It's too late, Mom. I'll think about it, I replied coldly, and without giving her time for another tirade, I hung up. She sat down on the sofa, staring at the endless city behind the glass. The horizon line seemed clear and sharp, as if it had cut the sky in two. My thoughts were torn between the present and the past, and I let them take me back to those times that I tried to forget about. I shouldn't have existed. Mom was young, 22, barely out of college, with plans full of ambition. Dad, too. They dreamed of traveling, of a career, of a life full of freedom and opportunity. A child? No, there was no place for me in their picture of the future. Mrs. Miller, I could almost hear the doctor's voice, which my grandmother had once told me about. Abortion may jeopardize your ability to have children in the future. So they decided to leave me. Not out of love. Out of fear. Based on calculation. It was as if the bet was not on birth, but on the absence of regrets. And from the very beginning, I felt like I was a stranger in their lives. They used to leave me at my grandparents', first for weekends, then for weeks. My childhood smelled of fresh pastries and old books. I remembered the warmth of my grandmother's hands, her stories before going to bed, the creak of the rocking chair. The sound of Grandpa's laughter, his patient explanations of how to assemble intricate puzzles correctly. They were my home. Back in their cozy little world, I knew I was needed. I was loved there. But everything changed when I turned 6. Then Grandma said, "She needs stability. Her own house. She can't live between us and you all the time." Mom tried to protest. "But she's happy here. She needs parents," Grandpa's voice was firm. "In a real house. In the family. The real one." My parents reluctantly agreed to pick me up. They bought a house, built a career, and, as I found out later, were planning a second child. Planned, desired. I was 7 years old when my mother announced her pregnancy. I remember her beaming face, her father's proud smile. I remember how they enthusiastically chose wallpaper for the nursery, how Mom stroked her rounded belly, and Dad photographed her for a family album. For Peyton. Peyton was born on a bright spring morning. And as soon as she was brought home, my world changed. Split up. While I was sitting at the kitchen table, pouring myself milk and watching the hands of the clock adjust to the time when it was time for me to go to school, my mother fed Peyton with a spoon, uttering funny sounds. When I got my first 5, proudly handing the report card to Dad, he just glanced at it, said a brief, "Well done," and returned to help Peyton with her finger paints. "Mom, I got the lead role in a school play," I said happily one evening. "That's sweet, honey," she replied absently, without looking up from writing Peyton's first word in her notebook. After that, I fell silent. I didn't tell them about my successes anymore. I found my way to my grandparents. A bike, fresh air, a house that smelled of cookies and milk. My brilliant girl. Grandpa beamed at my report card. "We are proud of you." They didn't forget a single one of my birthdays. They didn't miss a single school exhibition. When I won the science fair in 5th grade, there were only my grandparents in the hall. Her parents chose to take Peyton to her dance concert. "We'll have a cake when we get back," Mom promised. The cake never appeared. They didn't return until late in the evening. Peyton got tired of dancing, and they decided to postpone my birthday party. It never took place. This pattern was repeated from year to year. They forgot my piano recital, where I played the opening solo, and didn't come to my high school graduation, making excuses that Peyton had a cold. When I won the math competition at the state level, they were busy with Peyton's soccer practice. Their lives revolved around her, and her every move was recorded and celebrated. Peyton's missing tooth. A family holiday. Her first bike ride. Hundreds of photos from different angles. When Peyton joined the junior high cheerleading squad, our common room was decorated with balloons for a week. I found solace in my studies and in my grandparents. Their love was unconditional. I used to run away to them every weekend. My grandmother listened to my stories there, and my grandfather helped with homework. "You're going to do great things, Tina," Grandma would say, handing me a new book or a small trinket. "Just wait and see." But I was invisible at home. If Peyton didn't need something, I turned into a convenience service: babysitter, tutor, driver. I took her to friends, helped her with her lessons, and was there for her when she needed attention. Every year, Peyton became more and more unbearable. By the age of 9, she was already skillfully manipulating her parents, knowing how to trick them around her finger. "You're just a mistake they're stuck with," she whispered to my back. "No one wants you here." I tried not to react. She held on, endured, thinking that ignoring was the best weapon. But one day, when I was 17, Peyton went too far. I was studying for my exams when she burst into my room. "Put your things away," she demanded, her gaze sharp. "I need your desk for my art project." "I'm learning, Peyton." "Use your desk." "No. I want this one." "Mom and Dad said I could have anything I wanted in this house." "That's not true," I said, barely able to contain my irritation. "And I'm busy." Peyton didn't answer. She just started throwing my textbooks on the floor. "You're so selfish." "Stop it," she shouted. "You're just jealous because Mom and Dad love me more." Something inside me snapped. All those years of disappointment, humiliation, and suppressed resentment exploded instantly. I snatched the phone out of her hand. "Give it back." "Stop it," she screamed. "No," I said firmly. "You're being punished. Go to your room and think about how you treat people." She stamped her foot, throwing a tantrum. "I'll tell you. I'll tell Mom and Dad everything." "I don't care," I replied, surprised at my own firmness. "Someone has to teach you the consequences." When her parents returned, Peyton was ready. She put on an Oscar-worthy show: sobs, crocodile tears, a trembling voice. She hit me. Peyton was sobbing. And she took my phone. She locked me in a room. I stood on the sidelines, watching everything unfold. "I didn't hit her," I said calmly. "I took her phone away from her because she destroyed my study materials." She was being disrespectful. Mom's face flushed with anger. "How dare you touch your sister?" "Don't make excuses." My father interrupted. "Give me the phone immediately. You're being punished. Month. Don't go anywhere except school." My heart sank. We had a school trip planned for the weekend. My first opportunity to break out, to see something new. "Dad," I began. "Cancel the trip," Mom snapped. "Maybe it'll teach you to be kinder to your sister." For the next month, they behaved as if I had ceased to exist. They walked past me like they were walking past a wall. At dinner, they talked about me in the third person, as if I wasn't at the same table. Peyton was grinning, enjoying her victory. That's when I really realized these people weren't my family. They were just strangers who happened to have the same DNA. When graduation day came, I wasn't surprised to find only Grandma and Grandpa in the audience. Their warm smiles were the only real light that day. Mom told them that I was not worthy of their presence. My farewell speech received a standing ovation, but the 2 empty seats in the audience spoke louder than any words. I tried not to look in the direction where they were supposed to be sitting. I tried to focus on those who were nearby, but the emptiness echoed in my chest. "We're so proud of you, darling," Grandma whispered, hugging me tightly. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was confident. "Where are your parents?" Mrs. Thompson, my favorite teacher, asked. Her kind eyes searched for an explanation. I just shrugged my shoulders. By that time, their absence had become something familiar to me. Natural. The usual one. The day after graduation, Mom and Dad called me into the living room. I could tell from their faces that this conversation was going to be unpleasant. My father's face was impenetrable, and my mother's lips were pressed into a thin line. I carefully pressed record on my phone, hiding it partially under my hip. Something told me to remember this moment. Capture it. You turned 18, my father began, his voice cold and even. As an adult, it's time for you to move out. Mom nodded, not even trying to soften the blow. It's time to take your life into your own hands. I exhaled slowly. What about college? I asked, knowing the answer, but wanting to hear it out loud. Write it down. Leave a proof. They laughed. Not out of kindness. Their laughter was harsh, sharp, as if a blade had slid through the air. We don't pay for your education, my father said. Money for Peyton's future. Mom sighed, as if she had thrown off the weight of many years of burden. We can finally stop being responsible for you. Let's be honest, my father continued, his voice icy. We never wanted you to be born. Mom couldn't have an abortion because of the medical risks, and we're stuck with you. Mom glanced at her manicured nails, as if discussing the weather. You've never been a part of this family. Not really. And now it's time to go. I sat there, letting the phone record every harsh truth, every confession that I'd always known but that had never been spoken out loud. For how many years I had guessed, felt a cold alienation, but now it was confirmed by words. My hands were in my lap. Immobile, strong. I've learned to hide my emotions, lock them deep inside. I'll leave tomorrow, I said softly, proud that my voice didn't waver. Their relief was almost tangible, like a weight lifted from their shoulders. All right, my father nodded. No drama. You make everything easier. Peyton's voice came from the stairs above, full of sincere delight. I'm going to turn her room into a gaming paradise. A huge TV, a new console, maybe even a streaming installation. It's going to be amazing. I went up to my room in silence. I packed my things that night, listening through the wall to my sister's excited plans. 18 years of life fit in 2 suitcases and a backpack. I had nothing else to take. The next morning, I left the house without saying goodbye. I got into a taxi and went to where they were really waiting for me. At my grandparents'. When I told them everything and showed them the recording, Grandma burst into tears. Her hands were shaking as she held mine, and I could feel the pain radiating through every touch. These are not the people we raised, Grandpa whispered. His voice cracked like a cracked tree. These are not our children. Years of disappointment could be seen in his gaze. I knew, said Grandma, wiping her eyes. I knew they didn't appreciate you, but I didn't think they were that cruel. I took out the envelope. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. Out of pride. I have somewhere to go, I said, handing them the letter. I was accepted into the investment program. Full scholarship. Including housing. They watched, read, and stared at the lines in silence. They want me so much that they're even willing to pay for my dorm. I allowed myself a small smile. My recommendations made an impression. The dean personally called to offer me a scholarship. Grandma hugged me, her familiar lavender scent enveloping me like a warm blanket. We're so proud of you, honey, she whispered, trembling. We are so proud. I closed my eyes, absorbing her warmth, allowing myself to feel needed for the first time in a long time. Please, she added, don't tell them. Let them think they've lost. They don't deserve to know. They don't know, Grandpa agreed bitterly, his weather-beaten hand squeezing my shoulder. And so be it. Your success will be yours alone. That evening, in my old childhood bedroom at my grandparents' house, I finally allowed myself to cry. The tears flowed silently, soaking the pillow that held the scent of lavender in the past that I couldn't erase. That fall, I left for Harrison Business School with 2 suitcases and determination burning in my chest. My new life began in a small dorm room overlooking the campus. It was modest and simple, but this room seemed more like home to me than any corner of my parents' house. I threw myself into my studies. Concentration has become my armor. Investment analysis was easy. There was something about numbers that I hadn't found in life: order, clarity, logic. Patterns, forecasts, and a careful balance of risk and reward. Everything made sense. Everything was under control. Between classes, I found a prestigious internship at Goldman Sachs. In the second year, Morgan and Reed. I knew what I wanted, and I moved towards it with cold determination. "Tina, you're exactly the person we're looking for," my supervisor said at the assessment. "Your attention to detail is impressive, and your views on the market are mature beyond your years." I just nodded. The confession was pleasant, but not surprising. I'm used to having to achieve everything on my own. His personal life remained a shadow. She was almost gone. Grandma called weekly. Her voice was warm and caring, as always. Sometimes she'd start. "Your sister, your parents." "Please, Grandma," I interrupted softly. "I don't want to know." She sighed, changed the subject to the garden, recipes, Grandpa's bowling league. We talked about everything and nothing. A dance of words, neatly skirting the gaping hole in the shape of a family. They remain my only link to the past, but even with them, I kept certain doors tightly closed. After graduating from university, Morgan and Reed immediately offered me a position. I started out as a junior analyst, but my views on market trends quickly attracted attention. I've worked long and hard. She took on difficult projects that others avoided. I was looking for challenges, testing my limits. "Miller, Thompson's portfolio is impressive," my boss remarked in his first year on the job. "Keep up the good work, and you'll go far." We have not seen such a thorough analysis from a junior analyst. He was right. Each year brought new responsibilities and corresponding promotions. I moved from a small studio to a studio apartment, then to a 2-room apartment in the best area of the city. Each move was a step away from the past, closer to the life I had built myself. By the age of 28, I was managing my own team and managing large client portfolios. My colleagues joked that I live and breathe investments. They were wrong. I breathed in survival. Every success, every promotion, was proof to me. A confirmation that I'm worth something. That I'm no longer the kind of child you can ignore. And so, one day, I was standing in my new apartment in the city center. The sunset cast golden light on the walls. Huge floor-to-ceiling windows opened onto the streets of Boston, sparkling in the evening light. 5 years of 60-hour work weeks. 5 years of strategic investments, careful savings, and continuous work. And it all paid off. Marble countertops. Parquet floors. The kind that made one's heart skip a beat. I built this life. Completely by myself. Without a penny of help from those who should have been there. And that's when I heard the phone vibrating on the kitchen island. The screen glowed with a name I hadn't seen in years. Mom. I stared at the screen as if I were a ghost coming out of the shadows. It was as if the past had decided to remind me of itself. The message from her was short, almost casual. "Hi, Tina. We're hosting a moving house party. It would be great if you could come. Everyone will be glad to see you." I stared at this message for a long time, holding the phone in my hand as if it were some kind of fragile, dangerous object. The irony burned. They didn't want to know where I'd been all these years. They weren't interested in my progress. They didn't ask questions. They didn't try to find me. They just didn't want to know. And now, when I finally achieved everything on my own, when I had a life that would be considered successful in their understanding, they wanted me to come. So that everyone is happy. The plan formed in my head instantly. After 11 years of silence, they wanted to see me. All right. I'll let them see. To see exactly what they refused. Exactly what was thrown away. The recording from that last day was still on my phone. Carefully transferred through each update, stored like a sharp blade in a sheath, waiting for the right moment. And he came. I typed in a quick reply. I'll be there. Mom's reply came almost instantly. Wonderful. I can't wait to meet you, darling. The word darling from her sounded like a lie covered with a thin glaze. I took the day off and went to my parents' new house. A modest 2-story house in a middle-class neighborhood. Good, solid. But nothing compared to my apartment in the city center. I looked at the neat facade and thought how many missed opportunities and understatements were hiding behind these walls. When I arrived, the guests' cars were already parked on the path, and laughter could be heard from the open windows. Lively, sincere. I froze, my hand froze on the handle of the car door. 11 years old. I took a deep breath, grabbed the gift, an expensive bottle of wine that I knew they couldn't afford, and headed for the door. Rosemary, my cousin, was the first to notice me. Tina. Oh, my God, it's been forever. She hugged me tightly, smelling of sweet perfume, sticky like syrup. Where have you been hiding? Other relatives gathered around. A chorus of enthusiastic greetings, questions that no one expected honest answers to. How are things in the big city? Aunt Joan asked, looking me up and down. We saw your apartment online, someone put in from behind. Why don't you visit anymore? Great Aunt asked. You look so successful, Rosemary said. I smiled politely, shrugging my shoulders. Let them think. Let them guess. Let them admire from afar. I noticed my cousins whispering, glancing at my designer outfit, my neat earrings, and my expensive shoes. Their gaze involuntarily compared. And then they appeared in the doorway. Mom, with a little more gray hair than I remembered, but still restrainedly elegant. Father, slightly fatter, but with the same straight posture. And Peyton. She's changed. There was caution in her face, as if she was wearing a mask, trying to guess what to prepare for. Tina. Mom rushed forward, holding out her arms, and I let her hug me. My baby. My father joined me, putting his hand on my shoulder. We've missed you so much. We are so proud of everything you have achieved. Their performance was impeccable. Too perfect. If I didn't know the truth, maybe I would have believed it. If I hadn't been standing behind those hands, behind that smile, the lies captured in that very recording on my phone. Their hands were gripping my shoulders too tightly. Their smiles trembled on their lips a little unnaturally. The years have given them time to hone this performance. The party moved inside. Wine flowed, food spread, and relatives made up for the lost years with conversations and laughter. I noticed how my parents touched my hand from time to time, laughing a little louder than necessary at my words, making sure that everyone could see their joy, their devotion to their long-lost daughter. The living room was cramped, crowded with people, whose eyes kept stopping on me, as if I were an exhibit worthy of silent admiration. When supper was served, Uncle Robert got up. His face was slightly pink from drinking wine, and he was holding a glass in his hands. To Sarah and David, he began, sounding confident. to their beautiful new home. There were cheers and the clatter of glasses. "And for Tina," he added, and his tone changed. His eyes became sharp. "I have something I want to say." The room froze. Someone froze with a fork halfway to his mouth. Someone's glass clattered on the edge of a plate. "How dare you?" he began, his gaze piercing me. "How dare you leave your family? Become rich, successful, and refuse to even call your poor parents?" They were heartbroken. They wondered what they had done wrong. They cried because of their ungrateful daughter. My stomach clenched. I looked at my parents. Their faces are perfectly lined with worry. Dad frowned, Mother's lips twitched. And even, yes, Mom managed to squeeze out a tear. A holy sacrifice. "They forgive you," Uncle Robert continued, his voice rising, gaining strength. "Because that's their kindness. After all they've done for you. After all the sacrifices." He paused. There was silence in the room, strained and sharp. Waiting for my reaction. My downfall. My remorse. I looked around the table. Dozens of pairs of eyes looked at me, some with curiosity, others with condemnation. My parents spent 11 years creating their own version of the truth, in which they were victims. In their story, I was an ungrateful daughter who abandoned her family for wealth and success. I cleared my throat, forcing myself to speak slowly, calmly. "Mom, don't you want to tell everyone the truth?" Her back straightened. She caught a few glances from her relatives and suddenly, as if turning on an old mechanism, gained confidence, honed by years of lying. "Actually, yes," she said. "Life with Tina has always been difficult. She was spoiled, arrogant, ungrateful for everything we gave her." She looked around the room, making eye contact with everyone. "She ran away after graduation, left us. No phone call, no letter, no visit. We were devastated." The relatives began to shake their heads. The wine glasses tinkled softly, emphasizing sympathy. Peyton, who was sitting next to her mom, dabbed at the corners of her eyes with a napkin, squeezing out another drop of fake regret. "It's the same trick she honed as a child." I nodded, as if considering her words. Then she slowly took out her phone. "Let me share something," I said. Mom tensed up. His father's gaze became heavy, and a premonition instantly hung in the air. I opened the required entry. The one I carried with me for 11 years. "This is a recording from the day I left. I was 18 then." I clicked play. The room froze. My teenage voice echoed through the space. "What about college?" It sounded softly from the speaker. And in response, their laughter. Hard, cold, like a knife blade. "We don't pay for your education. This money is for Peyton's future." Then her father's voice. "I see, alien. We never wanted you to be born. Your mother couldn't have an abortion because of the medical risk, so we're stuck with you. You've never been a part of this family." Every word pierced like a hammer blow. Each confession is a striking nail in the facade of their ideal life. I stopped recording. The silence was deafening. Only the measured, quiet tapping of the wall clock filled the room, as if counting down the seconds before the rupture. I looked around at my relatives. Aunt Marie's hand went up to her lips, covering them. Her eyes were filled with terror. Cousin Rachel slowly lowered her gaze, unable to stand what was happening. Uncle Robert's face was turning dark, like a storm slowly approaching on the horizon. "That's why I left," I said. "Ask your grandparents. They accepted me that day. They were there when you kicked me out." I got up from the table, my hands were shaking, but I controlled myself. "You invited me here only today because you saw my success online. Before that, there were 11 years of silence. No phone call. No birthday cards. Nothing. I took one last look at my parents. The faces of the father and mother were frozen with rage, anger, almost panic. Uncle Robert jumped up, his face pale. Sarah? David? How could you? The guests began to push back their chairs. The scraping of wood on the floor seemed almost unbearable. Every creak sounded like a confession. Like a blow. Marie couldn't even look at my parents. She gathered up her purse with trembling hands. You're monsters, she whispered. Tina, Uncle Robert began, slowly approaching me. His voice was full of regret. I'm so sorry. I did not know. I had to ask. The others followed him in silence, avoiding eye contact with my parents. The words cruel lies and shame were whispered. Their footsteps in the hallway, the doors opening and closing, are like punctuation marks at the end of their family chapter. The house quickly emptied. It's just them, Mom, Dad, and Peyton. All three of them were sitting at the table like idols. Their faces were distorted, masks were thrown off. You've ruined everything. Mom screamed. Mascara ran down her cheeks, black as their false past. How dare you? We got you, my father shouted, as if he had forgotten what had just been said. We gave you a house. I just grinned, smoothing the folds of my dress. You wanted me to be here. I came. I just played by your rules. The only difference is that I brought the receipts. I turned around and walked to the exit. Tina. Peyton's sobs followed me down the hall, but I didn't turn around. I went out into the night. I walked along the path that led from their house. For the last time. Later, through my grandmother, I found out that most of the relatives had severed ties with them. The truth cost them more than just their reputation today. But for me, this truth was a release. I had friends who chose me. Colleagues who respected. And the peace that came when you finally exposed the lies that had been dragging on for years. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It's just life. Free. On their own terms. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.